Welcome back to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm Brad Williams, and today I'm joined by pianist, composer, and improviser Kris Davis. Kris is one of those rare artists who seems to expand the definition of what the piano can do. She's fearless as a performer, deeply intentional as a composer, and she's also a builder. Through her label Pyroclastic Records, and through her work at Berklee with Terry Lynn Carrington, as part of the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice. In this conversation, we talk about everything from writing for big band and staying disciplined at the instrument, to the art and the practical realities of prepared piano. We also go deep on her powerful Solastalgia suite for the Ludoslavsky Quartet, a piece that confronts climate grief and the strange feeling of losing your home while you're still living in it. This one is thoughtful, funny, and genuinely inspiring. Here's my conversation with Kris Davis.
Since I was always rather a rebellious student, I decided that instead of playing all of those scales, I would make my own scales. And I would make my own conceptions of the vertical, which is the harmonic, the horizontal, which is the linear. And in doing that, began the pleasure principle. Because if you make your scales based on that which pleases your senses, so that it is not a question from that point of discipline, it becomes perhaps an expression of the joy of living. Because one of the things that the cab driver and I got into was the fact that for me, music has saved my life. Because it is something that no matter what kind of unfortunate social situation that you might be in, or whatever kind of rage or frustration, the thing that has always brought me back to understanding that there is another purpose of living is music. And once you get into that, and all of a sudden you see it is, you send out perhaps the vibrations of the joy, but it also makes your insides feel in a certain way.
Kris, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's such a pleasure to meet you and have some time to chat with you. I'm such a fan of you and all of your talents as a composer, as a performer, improviser, collaborator, and I've been looking forward to talking with you. So it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, I was looking at your schedule. It looks like, do you have a trip to Europe in the next week or so?
Yeah, I'm heading to Hamburg tomorrow to work with the NDR Big Band there, with Nikki Isles, who's the new director, and Ingrid Jensen and Christine Jensen. So it'll be a fun week of working on some big band music. They commissioned a piece, and so I'll premiere that and see how well I did with the writing. It's been 20 years since I've written a big band chart. So
wow. Is there a theme or anything around the piece, or is it just a tune that you wrote for the ensemble?
It's just a tune. Actually, I wrote it for my trio, and we have a new record coming out in the fall, and it's just a tune from there, and I expanded it for big band. And it's a little tricky. It's like a shifting meters kind of a piece, so I think it'll be a good challenge for the band. I'm glad we have a week to practice.
Oh, that's great. Well, that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, it'll be exciting to. I would imagine bringing a new piece of music to an ensemble like that. It has to be both exhilarating but also slightly terrifying, because you think, okay, I hope I did everything the way that it should be.
That's exactly it. I was just going through the piano part today and realized, oh no, there's a repeat in the wrong place. And so, these things happen and we figure it out in rehearsal. But yeah, I'm glad I caught it now versus when I was there.
Yeah, that's very good. Do you have set time every day that you like to devote for practicing in front of at the instrument versus maybe composing? Do you have a workflow that you try to stay, disciplined to?
Yeah, I mean, mostly, I try to play every day and sort of do maintenance of just like the physical work at the piano. And if I'm like practicing for anything, I'll try to do that, in the mornings. For composing, I have to kind of build it into my year where I'll just have like a week or two to just compose and I won't teach or really worry about practicing. So those have to be kind of a different focus, a different way of working.
Yeah. I saw in your calendar, I think I saw it on the Big Ears website. I think, are you returning to the festival this year?
Not this year. We played last year
Oh, you played
with the
last
trio.
year. Okay, you played
Yeah, yeah,
25. Yeah.
yeah.
How was that experience? I went, I think in 2014, I believe is when I went. How was that experience for you?
Oh, it's always great being there. You see so many people that you've worked with over the years, and it's like a big family reunion, and such great projects and performances going on. Always discovering new things when I go to that festival. So I really enjoy it. I try to stay for a few days so I can I can check out what's going on.
Yeah, when I went, it was Steve Reich was in attendance, and it was all based around a lot of his pieces were performed that weekend, and my son and I went up, and it was just, it's, in my opinion, at least for the music I enjoy, the music that resonates with me, I don't know if there's a better music festival anywhere than Big Ears.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. It's cool to see the excitement around that festival, and it's a forward thinking way of programming and curating a festival that's not just jazz, it's not just one thing. And I think there's a lot of excitement and curiosity, around what's happening every year. That's the festival that comes up, most in conversations with other artists and fans. And I understand why. It's really a special place.
Yeah, it really is. I absolutely love it. I'm was such a fan of I've sent your Tiny Desk performance to so many musician friends of mine that I talk with regularly. We send music around to each other. Just such a fan of your performance on there. Um, and I wanted to ask you about one of the things that I really enjoy in your composition and performance is your use of prepared piano. And I would love to just know how that became something that you wanted to utilize as a composer and as a performer. And was it informed by people like John Cage and Henry Cowell? How did that come into your life as a performer?
When I was about 24, 25, I heard about the pianist Benoît Delbecq, who's a French pianist based in Paris. And he does a lot of interesting things with prepared piano. And so I signed up tried to see if I could get a grant to go and study with him, and I ended up getting it. So I went and studied with him for the summer. I guess that was 2005. And yeah, he just showed me, his approach, which was very rhythmic based. He loves Ligeti, which I also love
Yeah.
Ligeti's music, and he was creating all these kind of rhythmic cycles, and he, chose these materials that are very specific to him and his sound, these like long wood sticks, and he put like a tack on the end of the stick so that it had this kind of like buzzing sort of snare drum sound, and like really was thoughtful about the preparations and encouraged me to find my own way with it, if I was going to adopt it. And so from there, I was, super excited to explore, and discovered John Cage's music, the piano, his piano preparation pieces. There's a record by Boris Berman. I think it's called Prepared Piano Volume 1 or Volume 2 of John Cage. But those albums were super influential for me. And I tried to adopt some of his materials in the piano, and ended up, I don't know, just going to the to Staples or the hardware store and like seeing what might be possible. And so I kind of found my own way with it. I mean, it's not as elaborate as Benoît's, setup, but it kind of works for me. And I tried to find sounds, piano preparation, it can be very soft. If you hit the key too hard, the stuff will pop out of the string. Like I use little erasers and magnets. So you have to be like a little sensitive about how hard you hit something, and that limits you in terms of volume. So it also limits you in terms of how you can use it in an ensemble. So I tried to, sort of address some of these questions and find preparations where, I could play louder, or I know it's not going to, pop off if I jump in there with a trio or a saxophonist, and it'll come through. So yeah, just a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Have you ever had any pushback from a venue or a client that if you're using a rental instrument that they don't want you to manipulate anything inside the instrument?
Yeah, that always, comes up. But I have a letter from Steinway, saying I'm not doing anything, to hurt the piano. Even still, sometimes people don't want you to prepare the piano. I have a funny story I could share about this if we have a second.
I'd love to hear it. Absolutely.
During the pandemic, I went to play in Vermont at the Vermont Jazz Center, where they invited a couple pianists to play solo, and I was one of the pianists, and Craig Taborn, who's a dear friend of mine, was another pianist. And so I played, and the guy that, runs a series was like, "Are you going to prepare the piano?" I was like, "Yeah, is that okay?" He said, "Yeah, no problem." And then as I started to sort of set it up, he was standing over the piano like, "What's that? What are you doing?" Like, and I, started to become very self-conscious and worried, like, "Oh, I'm not going to be very free on this," because it's, he's worried about his piano. And so anyway, I play my set, and then Craig Taborn gets up, and I'm in the back room, and I'm like, "Wow, he's really like going for it today." Like, and I come out, and after the set, and he's broken off the B flat just above middle C, the black key, and there's blood all over the piano. And Eugene, the guy who was running the festival, was like, he comes up, and he's just, just so like cannot believe it. And I nudged him. I'm like, "And you were worried about me."
Yeah, look at what I did not do.
Right, exactly.
That's really funny. Wow. Yeah, I've played. So I started out as a percussionist and played a lot of Cage's music throughout the years, and was just the sonatas and interludes specifically. I was really drawn to those compositions of him as a writing for prepared piano, and it just when I hear the music that you compose and perform for that, it just it really resonates with me. So thank you for that.
Oh, cool. Thank you. And thanks for sharing the tiny desk with your friends. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was when it started out, I was like, "Oh, heck yes. Maybe this is probably the first prepared piano that's been on a tiny desk concert. At least that's my hope."
Hey, that would be my claim to fame.
That's right. That's right. I've been listening a lot to this new commission and recording that you recently released with the Ludoslavsky Quartet. It's an amazing piece of music.
Oh, thank you.
The Solastalgia Suite. I hope my pronunciation is correct.
Yes, perfect.
Yes. And it's just a remarkable piece, and the way that it's composed, and then the way that you all execute it, it's incredible. I would love to just maybe dig in and ask you to talk a little bit about the commission of it and the collaboration that happened, and just what emotionally you brought to that piece, because it's an important topic too, right? It's not just about the notes on the page and the way it's performed, but I think there's also so much emotional content around what the piece is about. So I'd love if you could speak on that for a little bit.
Yeah, sure. The piece was commissioned by the Jazz to Pad Festival, which is based in Wrocław, Poland. I'm probably not saying that as correctly as I could, but so the Ludoslavsky Quartet, they're usually commissioned every year to work with the jazz artists through that festival. Craig Taborn's done it, Vijay Iyer, Emmanuel Wilkins, and so I was sort of like, I've never written for strings, so I was poking around trying to figure out, how to approach it that would make sense to me, and just listening to Ligeti's string quartets and Bartók and a couple younger composers like Andrew Norman, and started to dig in. And as I was writing the pieces, a lot of times the titles for albums for albums and also for title tracks come, sort of during the process of writing or after. And I was listening to this podcast, the New York Times podcast, The Daily, and they had some scientists on that were speaking about the coral reefs in Florida and how they were trying to create these nurseries and, protect the coral reefs. But basically the water was just getting too warm and the reefs were bleaching, and there was nothing they could do. And it just got to that point where they were grieving, for the reefs, for their livelihood, for the loss of biodiversity, and for just what this was going to mean for the planet. And it sort of struck me like, wow, they're really experiencing like a particular kind of grief around climate change. And I started researching and found this word solastalgia that was coined by an Australian philosopher named Glenn Albrecht. And he describes the word as a feeling of loss of your home while you're still living in it. And that word sort of resonated to me with the idea of, what these scientists were experiencing, and then my own experience. I'm from Calgary, Canada, and I go home to visit my family. And, in the summers, I used to spend so much time outside. I have a real connection with nature in that part of the world. And now when I go, if there's forest fires and the sky is bright orange and you just really can't be outside, the air is toxic at certain times of the summer. So it sort of resonated with me in a personal way as well, and I figured probably a lot of other people feel this, in their own way. So I titled it the Solastalgia Suite, and each movement sort of focuses on a different element of, that feeling. There's also sort of built in the 7 stages of grief, which are less, overt in the description of the titles of the pieces. But those sort of emotions are built in, and I was meditating on those as I was writing the piece and trying to, think about what a feeling of, anger or, fear or acceptance, how that might sort of move in and out of the piece. Because as we know, grief, sort of, it doesn't go in the stages. You can move in and out and move backward through these stages. There's no sort of timeline for it. So the piece sort of has, that element weaved in as well.
I was struck by just the harmonic content of it, and how, yeah, that emotional through line of maybe, can be, was composed with very tonal parts of it, where maybe it's, and I don't know what your thought process on it was, but it seems like maybe a memory of this, and maybe it's a memory of a happy time, but then we're going back into the grief, and then it's, there's dissonance in it, and yeah, I love how it takes you through that experience of processing the emotional piece of loss, and it can almost transcend this and be about loss of a person, or anything. Yeah, it's I was really emotionally attached to it while listening to it.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, another thing that inspired the piece was Olivier Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time, which is
Oh, absolutely.
one of my
Yeah.
all-time favorite pieces. And even the first piece of the suite, which is called Interlude, is kind of loosely based on some of the language of that piece. And not a lot of people know that piece was written when Messiaen was in a concentration camp during the war. And, I was just like thinking about that. He was processing all these emotions, and it's not really like a call to action in terms of, I mean, it's just like a processing of that moment to me.
Right.
And so I was kind of thinking about, wanting to write something in a similar vein with a similar kind of, I mean, obviously it's not the same in any way, but the idea of processing loss through a piece of music.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it's funny you bring that piece up, because that was literally the first piece that came to my mind when I started listening to it. It was that piece, and that it's almost those works that hold up a mirror, but also maybe hold up a window, where it's a reflective, but it's also looking beyond. I think that those important works that like this piece, or like Messiaen's piece, that yeah, it allows you to stop where you are, but also look back and look ahead. Yeah, it's a really important piece. I just appreciate what you did as a composer, and then executing it with a quartet. It's amazing, and I cannot believe that you had never written for string quartet before that. I was like, what? That can't be possible.
Well, I can believe it. There were, yeah, I mean, there was a steep learning curve. I mean, those players from the Ludoslavsky Quartet are amazing. They just, they can make anything sound good. But it was interesting to see there was a learning curve, on both sides, for me, for the writing, and knowing like what could really sing on the instrument, what was physically possible. I wrote some things that, even though they played them well, they're like, this is very hard. I'm like, oh yeah, if I had just written this one note down, it would have been way easier. So I learned some things, and also about notation and writing for strings and all the effects that they have available. And then for them, there's I would say 75% of the piece is written out. There's different kinds of challenges through the piece for improvisation. Some of them are more collective. There's a piece on there called Ghost Reefs, where there's all like a fully notated section that leads up to this very high, intense point. And then the music on the sheet, it just disappears. There's nothing, and it's like, you're at the top of the mountain, now find your way down, and they have to improvise some counterpoint to find their way out of the piece, and they do that very well. They do that all the time, so this was familiar territory for them. Some of the other pieces, like the first piece, there's a section where there's an ostinato and a viola solo, and that was harder. I mean, for a jazz artist, that's like very familiar territory, where you're soloing over an ostinato, and it was harder for the violist to know what to do, because there was no information in terms of like improvise with this cell or idea. improvise over this ostinato. And so that was a bit of a challenge to just figure out what to give him in order for him to feel free and successful as an improviser over this kind of a situation.
Yeah. Do you find that you have to or did you find that you had to adjust? Do you adjust your feel playing with a string quartet versus playing with a rhythm section? Do you find that your approach to the instrument changes at all if you were to play that with a bass player and a drummer, or is it similar territory?
That's such a good question, and that was something I was grappling with, and I'm not sure I ever figured it out. The recording of this piece it's actually a live recording. Most of what you're hearing was the performance at the Jazz Tapad Festival. We recorded the performance and also the rehearsal before, so I had two options to choose from. And with the string quartet, and then also with a space that's very reverberant, the point, when you hear like piano and cymbals, it's very clear to me where the piano needs to play in order to like make that sound the way I want it to sound. And it was much more difficult because the beat is so wide. Like, where is the beginning of the beat? How does that fit with a piano, which is a very percussive instrument, and the sound comes out and then dissipates? So I'm really glad you asked that, because it was very challenging, and I'm still not sure I know the answer, but it's something I want to keep exploring.
Sure, yeah, and it's I think playing with any different instrumentation can lead to the thought process of where does my beat fit with it, or where do I reside sonically on the instrument, so that I'm not fighting over the same range as this instrument. But yeah, there had to have been a lot of different elements at play playing with a string quartet, as if it's something that you've maybe not done so much in the past.
Yeah, for sure. And the few times I've worked with orchestras where there's a conductor, jazz musicians talk about this often, but the conductor, like, I have no idea where the beat is when I'm playing with strings. And there's a conductor, because their arm is going up, and then you hear the note, halfway through the arm going up. And as a jazz musician, playing with drums, where the point of where the sound comes out, is very specific, and it's familiar. It's just very confusing. So I don't know, what to do sometimes when I'm looking at a conductor in that particular experience. It's tricky.
Yeah. I've talked with several drummers on here about that particular experience of playing with a conductor. And I think it's maybe different for drummers, but I don't necessarily think so, in that trying to find that balance of when to be the driver and when to be the passenger in a situation like that. And when sometimes your eyes, like you're saying, watching the conductor can almost be more deceptive than just listening. But then if you listen too much, you find there might be a little bit of latency on when you play on the instrument. So yeah, it's a really delicate, dance to figure out how all of that works together.
Yeah, I had a chance to play Wayne Shorter's orchestral music with Esperanza and Terry Lynn Carrington and Tinika Postma. We went to Poland and played with an orchestra there. And it was really interesting to have that experience, sort of what you're saying, but then with the drums there, with Terry sort of saying, basically the drums set the beat and where the pulse is. So even though there's a conductor, the conductor sort of starts to follow the drums in a way, because that's what we're hearing as the point of rhythm and time.
speaking of Terry Lynn, I would love to. I know you've had a wonderful collaboration with her over the years, and I think are you both at Berkeley, or do you both work together there?
Yeah, we both teach at Berkeley. She started an institute within Berkeley in 2018 called the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, and she brought me on as an associate director there. And so part of my job is teaching, and part of it is to create programs with her and opportunities for the students.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about what that department, its mission is, and what I guess some of your day to day responsibilities in that, because it's really intriguing to me that and very crucial, I think, in this day to support the next generation of musicians and just people.
Yeah, well, it's sort of there's different areas that we sort of look at gender equity. One is within the institute. Most of the program we do is through ensembles. So we have 11 ensembles now, and we try to create gender balance in the ensemble, which might sound strange to someone outside of jazz, but if you're familiar with jazz, you often see mostly men on the stage, or maybe one woman amidst a mostly male ensemble. And so we try to create this gender balance where there is both men and women, but it's more equal. And now that I've been there 7 years now. I was just talking to an old student yesterday, and she went through the program at Berkeley, and then she went to Juilliard to study, and she's about to graduate. And she just called me to say, like, thank you so much for this program. Like, I'm so glad to have experienced what gender balance feels like in an ensemble, because Juilliard is very male heavy in its teachers and student body. And she was just like, that's shaped really how I think about music, and where I want to go, and who I want to work with. So those kinds of environments are really important for the students, and also for our male students who are like, oh, this is so much better when we adopt and embrace diversity. We're stronger. So that's really the message of the Institute. And then there's all sorts of programming going on. Like we put out a new standards book, compositions by 101 women composers, a couple of years ago. And we're working on a second edition of that book now. And Terry recorded a bunch of those pieces for her album, which we won a Grammy for, which was very exciting.
Yes, you did. It's wonderful too.
So Linda and O and I were the second and third women to ever win, in that category of best jazz instrumental album, and Terry was the first. So very, very cool and special thing that happened there. And and just so that's one of the things. That book has turned into a curriculum for a lot of programs all over the world, and people are just looking to the Institute to say, like, how can we, move towards gender equity in the future?
That's wonderful. And as the father of a 14-year-old daughter, I just can't say thank you enough for that, for just advocating for equity in music programs. My daughter is an up and coming musician at her school, and she does
Nice.
it at home. And I think of her someday going, if she decides to pursue that she's going to feel represented in any ensemble that she is. And I can tell you, to say there's an overbalance in one direction in that world is quite an understatement. And I appreciate you all taking steps to make sure that everyone feels safe and included. And it's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's the hope, and it's amazing to see, now that this has been going for 7 or 8 years, just how much the landscape of jazz and performance has changed. There's so many more women, both leading and playing as side people. So it's an exciting time, and it's exciting to see the change happen right before your eyes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Before we go, I wanted to ask you about your amazing label that you created, your Pyroclastic Records, which is exciting. This like adjacent, but also I imagine it's a big part of your life, administratively, creatively. I imagine there's a lot involved in that. Um, what did you what did you want to do differently, maybe than traditional labels, and what drew you to creating your own label?
Um, well, I started the label in 2016 mainly to put out a few of my albums that I had been awarded grants for and, owned the project outright. So it didn't really make sense to give it to like a small label who would profit from it. So I started the label, and the hope was that I could grow it and give other artists opportunities to release their music. And so the idea, was to support creative artists who were taking risks, adventurous artists, and help them get their music out, that they would be free from the profit motive of a record label. And so I set up a not-for-profit, and we've been going now for 10 years. There's, I think, almost 47 albums out, and
Wow.
it's been wonderful to support so many artists and see some of their careers really explode, like Patricia Brennan. And we have some younger artists and their projects coming out this year, which is very exciting. I've produced my first album on the label for a young pianist named Yvonne Rogers. And that's coming out in May, so I'm really excited for that. And it feels very meaningful work, and it makes me feel, part of the community now. I lived in New York for 20 years, and now I live outside of Boston in the woods. And so there is this sort of, I don't feel like I'm as connected to the scene. And it helps me to know, what's going on. People are sending me music all the time, and to do my part to keep it going.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's fantastic. Has running the label affected how you think about releasing music? I mean, especially now, I mean, everything has shifted so much over the last number of years as far as, media, physical media, digital media. How is how have you had to adjust in that respect?
Um, I mean, everything changes so quickly. Feel like we just keep like throwing noodles at the wall to see, like, is this gonna work? There's been times where artists have had tracks, on playlists, and made a bunch of money from that. And I thought, oh, okay, there's a some kind of formula here that we're trying to follow, and it just is revealed that that's not it at all. It's kind of at least in our experience, it just seems like totally random. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad that we have a board, and we have support for our artists, and we don't have to worry about that profit motive as much as regular labels that are like normal business models. And then the physical CDs, I really would like to stop printing those, but they still help us, and provide a way to recoup some of our funds from supporting these projects. So yeah, I don't know. And every like little label I talk to is, sort of in the same boat. Nobody knows, and things are getting harder with, the cost of customs and sending things. And it's it seems to be a mystery, but we continue on and try to figure it out.
well, thank you for that, and thank you for keeping the artist and the art at the forefront of those decisions, because I think, I do think that so many labels, it's about bottom lines, and it's about the numbers of releases and the numbers of units sold and the numbers of streams. And I think the when that becomes has to become uh the mode, or the path for the artist, that they have to spend more time focusing on that than perhaps being a performer or a composer. I think no one no one succeeds when that happens.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting to take risks on things that, maybe a major label wouldn't take a risk on. We had a project that is coming out soon by Simon Haynes. He's a young bass player, and I've never seen such like polarizing response to this album where people were, like sending, this is the greatest thing ever, and we want to feature it, in these big newspapers, and then other people saying, I can't believe you put this on the label. And I'm like, wow. To me, that's like a success story because, I just think like if something makes you feel and you feel so strongly that you take time out of your day to write an email expressing your feelings, that it's a win-win no matter what.
I completely agree, especially in there's so much music out there that it doesn't make me feel anything. So when something makes me have an emotional reaction to it, one way or the other, I agree. I think that's a success. So that's awesome. What does the rest of, or at least in the short term, what does your year look like as a performer, or any releases you have coming out?
I'm playing a lot with my trio this year with Jonathan Blake and Robert Hurst, and we're going to Australia in the fall and back to Europe, and a couple times this year in the States, and we have a new album coming out in September. We're playing at the Monterey Festival and at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival right after the album's released. So that's coming up. And then a few different projects. We're revisiting an old trio at the Village Vanguard with Tyshawn Sorey and Ingrid Laubrock and I this summer. We had a band called Paradoxical Frog that played a lot, the last like 15 years ago. And I think we're all interested in revisiting that particular trio. So we're having a reunion at the Vanguard in the summer from July 21st to 26th, and then some other concerts in the fall. And then I'm playing with a young musician. She was actually a student of mine at Berkeley, and she's moved to New York, is doing really well. Her name's Do-Young Kim. She's a gayagum player. I think she's actually coming to Big Ears with her project this year.
Cool.
Yeah, and she I don't know if you know the gayagum, but it's
Yes.
like Korean instrument with all these strings, and she's just a wonderful improviser. So we're going to Europe in a month to try this new trio with Tom Rainey and write some music for that. So yeah, some different things coming up, and but all good, feeling creative and inspired.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And getting to collaborate with many different musicians, and I'm sure that keeps things fresh for you, but it also probably keeps you feeling more creative and just feeling inspired to get to work with such a variety of different people, but also different instruments and different contexts. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel so blessed to have, all these opportunities to create and learn from other artists, and I'm just a person that needs to have a lot of variety. I get bored of doing the same thing all the time. So my life is sort of shaped around these sorts of, new experiences, and grateful that music is the vehicle to facilitate all of that.
That's wonderful. Well, Kris, it's been a pleasure spending some time with you today, and I just thank you for the music, and I just wish you all the best in your career and in the 2026.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to chat, and thanks for the great questions.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to the Bandwich Tapes wherever you listen, and consider leaving a rating or review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.